Chapter 7 begins shortly after where Chapter 6 left off. It is a bitter winter for the animals, made more challenging by their attempts to continue building the windmill in these harsh conditions. We're given insight into the humans' conversation surrounding the windmill, and they interestingly speculate that it fell down because the walls were too thin. And even though Napoleon rejects this explanation, he still decides to build the walls thicker. It's apparent that the windmill did fall down because the walls were too thin, but to admit this means that his design and leadership were flawed, and it is far more convenient to blame anything that goes wrong on Snowball. As the winter progresses, so too do the harsh conditions the animals experience. Food becomes extremely scarce, but Napoleon finds it necessary to hide this fact from Mr. Whymper and the human world. So he orders that the food bins be filled with sand and only topped off with actual grain, so as to give the appearance of abundance. They can't have the humans thinking that the animals are struggling. In order to buy food and help the animals not starve this winter, the pigs announce that the hens will now be required to relinquish their eggs so they could sell them. The hens protested that taking their eggs was murder, and this is, in fact, how it was described to them by Old Major in Chapter 1. Then there is real trouble on the farm. The hens rebel against Napoleon's orders, and instead roost on the rafters to make sure any eggs they do lay are smashed on the floor rather than surrendered for sale. This works for 5 days, until the hens are starved out, come down, and give in. Mr. Whymper heard nothing about this affair, and everything proceeds as usual. We, like the animals, can't help but feel like something is lost in this process, and it's up to us to consider which of these conditions are brought about by necessity and which are brought about by the increasing power Napoleon is wielding. After this episode, the focus turns once again on Snowball. Now, the last anyone has actually seen or heard from Snowball was in Chapter 5, when he was run off the farm by Napoleon's dogs. But he has become a convenient scapegoat for anything that goes wrong on the farm. The pigs successfully spread lies about Snowball, suggesting he was secretly frequenting the farm by night and performed all kinds of mischief. He gets blamed for all kinds of strange things that are obviously not true, like milking the cows in their sleep and hiding keys that end up just being misplaced. Snowball takes on a ghost-like influence on the farm, and it seems like just about anything that goes wrong can now be attributed to him. It seemed to the animals Snowball were some kind of invisible influence, pervading the air about them and manning them with all kinds of dangers. This is especially convenient for the pigs, since now all of the animals would more readily believe that Snowball has magically caused some mischief rather than the pigs themselves being up to no good. To solidify this belief, Napoleon makes a show of sniffing around the farm. Apparently, only he has the ability to smell Snowball's traces, and announces that Snowball has indeed been everywhere. The last thing the pigs want now is for the animals to have any positive recollection of Snowball or to think of him as a hero in any way. Enter Squealer, who expertly spreads fake news about Snowball to the rest of the animals. He reinterprets Snowball's role in the Battle of the Cowshed from Chapter 4, suggesting that Snowball was really on Mr. Jones's side the whole time. When the animals remember Snowball leading the charge and getting wounded in battle and getting awarded, but Squealer dismisses all of this as part of the arrangement Snowball had with Jones, and then portrays Napoleon as the real hero. And of course, when Squealer described the scene so graphically, it seemed to the animals that they did remember it. And even when Boxer continues to doubt that Snowball was a traitor, Squealer informs him that Napoleon has said this is so. And Boxer, whose optimism and ignorance are on full display here, stops thinking about it entirely and says, "If Comrade Napoleon says it, it must be right." Now, this chapter features one of the strangest scenes in all of Animal Farm. A few days after Napoleon sniffs out Snowball, he assembles all the animals together, then uses the dogs to drag those 4 pesky pigs by their ears in front of Napoleon. These pigs were the original pigs who attempted to speak out against Napoleon when he seized power. But now, to everyone's shock, and even admittedly to the readers, these pigs confess that they've been secretly in league with Snowball and are immediately killed by the dogs. And even more amazing, when Napoleon asks if anyone else has something to confess, Other animals come forward with their preposterous confessions of collaboration with Snowball, including the hens who led their rebellion and claimed Snowball appeared to them in a dream. All these animals are slain by the dogs on the spot, until there was a pile of corpses lying before Napoleon's feet, and the air was heavy with the smell of blood, which had been unknown there since the expulsion of Jones. It's interesting that at this moment, there's another correlation drawn between Napoleon and Jones. It's also very important to note a small but significant instant in the midst of these show trials. When the dogs smell blood, they temporarily lose their self-control and fling themselves on Boxer, and with very little effort, Boxer pins one dog down by the throat. Napoleon and the readers recognize right away that Boxer is stronger than the dogs and able to physically defeat Napoleon's military force. But Boxer does not realize this and fails to recognize Napoleon as an enemy. The chapter ends by featuring Clover, surrounded by the other animals, running out to the fields and surveying the farm, trying to remind herself that the farm was supposed to be part of her property, and trying to find the feeling of triumph and unity the animals shared after the rebellion. What's important to note, though, is that the thoughts and feelings we're given are not what Clover is actually expressing. The story makes a point of telling us that Clover cannot gather her thoughts or articulate her experiences, which reiterates for us the sad fact that the animals are not intelligent or educated enough to fully comprehend what is taking place or to combat against Napoleon's growing tyranny. And just to make a sad day sadder, after the animals sing Beasts of England to console themselves, Squealer comes round and informs them that the song is now banned, and just as the animals begin to question and protest, the sheep conveniently begin blurting out their 4 legs good, 2 legs bad chant and silence everyone. And just like that, the knobs of tyranny are pulled one notch tighter, and the lives of the animals inch one step back toward the conditions they had been under with Jones.